So we're going to talk again, literally about my favorite topic. I'll introduce myself in just a moment, but really happy to be working with Nancy and the team at Innovate Eastman, talking about finding your first customer. Topics for today. We're really going to talk about what I think is most important for startups, and it's really going from zero customers to one customer. If you don't find customer number one, you're not going to find too much success in your new venture. So, how do you find that first customer? How do you then leverage the experience with that first customer to go to customer number two, customer number 10, all the way up to customer number 100 and well beyond that? We're going to talk about leveraging and approaching your own network, how you ask the right questions, how you get in front of people that can provide you good feedback at the earliest of stages with your concept. We're going to talk about communication and project goals and really what you should be doing once you find someone that might be willing to try your product, purchase your service, or whatever it might be. We're going to talk about business to consumer startups as well as business to business, B2C and B2B. So it should be applicable across the board. Again, if you have a question, just interrupt me and say, hey, Luke, what about this? Okay. We're going to talk about leveraging and identifying early adopters. That's really who we're focused on finding right now. And we're going to talk about really validation and traction. They're both important, but there's a little bit of a difference that we should all be aware of. A couple things about myself. So I wish I was able to do this session in person, but I'm currently in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a little bit warmer than Winnipeg. I know, a little bit warmer than Manitoba. I know. Don't hate me for it, but I've been born and raised Manitoba-based entrepreneur. I've done about 12 startups in the last 12 years, everything from software startups to emergency healthcare applications to products for engineering teams, to cybersecurity, to different types of innovation consulting. Most recently, some of you might know Avid Golf, which is a golf simulator lounge in Winnipeg off of Taylor Avenue. That was also my startup, learning brick and mortar side of entrepreneurship. And most recently, I've started a consumer packaged goods company creating a performance drink targeting golfers. So having a lot of fun over here where there's a golf course for every gas station. And really, everything I would talk about today is really about building something from scratch, where you have an idea and you figure out how to get that idea in people's hands. Again, this could be a product, this could be a service, this could be an experience. I'm going to do my best to kind of cover the full gamut and hope we hit on everyone's use case a little bit. But feel free to jump in and kind of share your exact experience. Also, feel free to jump in and say, "Hey, Luke, just so you know, my startup is in this environment. How does that apply?" Again, I want to make sure I have everyone's use case in mind. But really, what I've done the most of is in finding the first customer. If you don't find the first one, you're not going to get too much done. And I've been able to do that in all of these startups. When I say 12 startups, I'm not talking 12 successful startups. Okay. A lot of those were failures or mediocre successes. But again, if you don't get started, you don't have a chance. So that's really where my story is. And just to quickly reiterate, really my most recent kick at the can, which I'll briefly share on a few of them today, but really in going from idea to physical product over the last 13 months, it really started with spending hundreds of hours doing research, sending what I felt was very awkward messages to people that I knew, trying to get feedback on my idea because I had no idea what I was doing. I started with an idea that was way different, actually, than a performance drink in a can. And I just kept pushing through conversations and feedback. Um, right now you could see that can wall behind me there. Really, we launched our company 4 months ago. We produced 30,000 cans of our drink. We're about to produce another 90,000 cans. I've gotten to know all the influencers, all the investors. I've gotten to be at most of the nicest golf courses South Florida has to offer. We've been at the largest buying shows in the industry. We've started to build a team. Um, a lot of really exciting stuff, which all started just from literally going this summer in June to Florida and finding the first customer. So, literally, me walking in with glass bottles of the samples and a picture of what the finished product might look like, and basically saying, would you buy this? Um, and through validation and kind of conversations like that, I decided to pull the trigger and take on a bunch of risk. And that's something that we're all having to consider. The whole reason we even have talks like this, it's about de-risking your startup. If everybody has $10 million in this conversation, half of this doesn't matter. You put down some money, you try something, you see how it works. But if you want to minimize the risk, the time, the effort, and the energy to achieve something successful, there's a bit of process that can help us find that first customer. So really a theme that's going to be frequent here in our chat is talk to customers. So I will reiterate that 4,000 times over. Um, if you're not sure, when in doubt, ask the customer. The best person to ask how to find customers, lo and behold, is the customer. Um, if you're trying to figure out what your marketing message should be, what to write on your website in terms of copy, if you're trying to figure out uh, how to describe your business, if you're trying to figure out where your customers might even be located or who your target customer is, or what makes you different than everything else out there, you can bluntly and completely ask your customers. So it's really important to start surrounding yourself with prospective customers as soon as one of those becomes a real customer. Remember, these are people you can talk to figure everything else out. So, this is also me with that red arrow. Um, Really, one of my favorite stories that kind of reiterated the importance of prioritizing the customer is how important it is to build with your customer, not just for them. So I created a healthcare application. It was used by paramedics throughout Manitoba. It was called Medic Hero. We were so excited because in this picture on this day, I think I was on every single major TV network, news channel, media outlet. Like I ran from CBC to CTV to Globe to Shaw all in the same day. Made me feel pretty important for a while. And then we launched the application and we looked at the analytics, and lo and behold, nobody was using it. Now, nobody is a stretch, but like literally almost nobody used it. I remember going and talking with a paramedic. He didn't know who I was, and I was asking him what he thought of the app, and he said it was crap. And I was like, it was appetizing for me to hear that because again, he didn't know who I was. So he told me everything that was wrong with the application, and then he figured out who I was, and well, he was a little embarrassed, but lo and behold, he helped me build the next version where we really figured out really what the user experience was, what exact problem we were solving, and literally built it with our users, not just for them. And we came out with version number 2, which literally had 10 times the daily active users. So we literally 10x'd just by massaging a few features, by asking them, what would you want this product to do? And having an idea what they want to do in the future, we were just able to make a few minor improvements on what we could do for our next version, and it leapfrogged ahead. So um, ever since that, I've just realized how important it is to build with and not just for your customers, and how to get that done right. Um, we're all in startup sales, whether you consider yourself a salesperson or not. It's important to know that. I really think it comes up with a three-part formula. Part of it is just raw hustle, um, doing things that don't scale. Hustle as hard as you can while trying not to get burnt out. Um, just how hard you're willing to work. Do things that, drive 5 hours just for a 15-minute meeting. Like stuff like that is what I would quantify as raw hustle. Um, Product sales and people skills. Well, the product sales and people skills. Uh, at the end of the day, we might want to build some type of minimum viable product. We'll want to build something at some point. I don't want to overemphasize product right now. But of course, we're going to need to have something to show for our work or what we plan to build, at least in the near future. This could be a prototype at this phase. But I'm thinking software, it can go much beyond that. It could be a picture of what you want to build. That's a great idea is to use a design software tool like Canva and just design an 8.5 by 11-inch advertisement of what you want to do. Even that I would consider almost product. From a sales standpoint, um, this is kind of understanding, you know, understanding the buyer, understanding what you should say and shouldn't say. It's also understanding stuff like establishing subject matter expertise, adding social proof, bringing in a business partner. For example, I'm approaching a lot of golf courses. I found it's helpful often if I bring in my now business partner who's a professional golfer, because it's easier for him to build rapport with our target customer because of his credibility. So I call it sales skills. If you'd have never had a sales job in your life, that's no problem. But just kind of think and try to understand what's expected to get in front of a customer. And often it's just showing up with a bunch of passion. And then the people skill side, I would say that's really emotional intelligence. That's kind of understanding, um, you know, how to best manage the relationship with the customer or with the prospect, but also trying to imagine if you're in the customer's position, what do you look like? Are you sitting there giving a 5-minute pitch about what you're doing without giving them a chance to speak? If you're catching your customer at a moment where they don't have time, are you being empathetic to the fact that they don't have time to hear your whole pitch? So it's really just about situational awareness and just pure emotional intelligence. Are you being a good human being? Do you understand how you should communicate in the circumstance? If you're willing to hustle, if you have a little bit of skills in terms of the product you've built, the salesmanship you're showing, and just your people skills, being likable goes a really long way. And then the lean startup methodology. We're going to touch on this in a little bit, but it's just the idea of how do you begin with a hypothesis and how do you actively test and get feedback and iterate on what you're building. So there's really kind of a three-part step to actually how to validate a startup, and it's really a build, measure, and learn type piece. And I'll tip you off on a good book you should all read, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. That's fantastic. Um, 0 to 1 customer. So almost all startups that fail have a product. So that's why we're not overemphasizing product here. Um, Customers are more important than capital. So just keep that in mind at the very beginning. I would not make the first thing you do go and build a fully fledged product. I would not make the first thing you do go and raise capital. You often don't need as much capital as you think. You often don't need to have as much of a product in front of you in order to convince a customer to say yes and then build a better product with their feedback. Um, I really feel startups are more art than science. So, we're I'm providing some feedback on what I think helps you find, keep, and grow your first customers. But just know at the end of the day, there's probably a billion ways to do this. And you got to figure out what works for you. But if 10 things make sense in this presentation, then we've done a good job today. Um, and finding your first customer really means learning your first customer. So that will be something I'm emphasizing here. Before you're even selling something, it's how do you put yourself in a spot where you learn what that customer needs, how that customer walks, how they talk. The more you understand that customer, the more it helps. Um, and and often, as I've alluded to in the bio, at least for this conversation, is usually that first customer story is extremely interesting, extremely entertaining. It's often weird and scary. I would hope that I would hope that most Manitobans would know at least the high level story of what Bold Commerce did, becoming the number one app developer for the Shopify website platform. The picture on the left is where they started. The picture on the right is much closer to where they are today. Um, the first, I had a podcast called The First Customer Club, and I was fortunate enough to have Jay Myers, the co-founder, but the original founder of Bold, join me. And the first app that they built was an upselling application. And the first user that they had on the platform, the first customer that they had, I believe the app crashed. The customer immediately disabled it and immediately gave them a negative review. And it was like a worst nightmare for the Bold team. Um, but of course, fast forwarding, we know that the story worked out. They ended up contacting this customer, figuring out exactly what was so negative in the experience, aside from something that simply wasn't working, and they improved it. And they actually won that same customer back. That customer became a loyal customer for years. And, as you know, they created hundreds of additional applications and have now branched off to become a business worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So that first customer story might be a complete disaster. It might be a train wreck. It might be plagued with launching something that doesn't work or a really negative customer review or you needing to find this customer through really weird means. But at the end of the day, find that customer, figure out a way how to make their life a bit better, and just keep growing. I mean, if you look at the stories of Airbnb and Tinder, just to give a couple examples, again, these are stories, maybe it's the what seduces me to entrepreneurship, but the idea of, renting out an air mattress in an apartment during a conference when there's no room in hotels and figuring out a way how to charge money for that, see that people are willing to do it, and then how to improve the experience with those first few guests, realizing how important something like trust is, to then get them to verify profiles and reviews. And I was just staying at an Airbnb till last night, so um, that started just as a quick little air mattress rental. Or Tinder. Tinder had the problem of how to get people to download their app. Well, how they did it is they basically got all the hot chicks, part of a sorority, to join the app first because they realized when the hot chicks joined the app, then all the guys wanted to join too. And they could approach all the frat boys who wanted to see the hot chicks on the dating app, and that created that initial buzz and that initial user base. So figuring out a way how to get the first customer or customers or first users, um, is also just a very thrilling process. It might be really scary at the time. So where do you start? So if you're literally, this is probably the most common question. Um, and I still ask myself this question myself, even though I've done this process a dozen times. Um, what is the first thing you should do? Well, first thing you should do is you should leverage your personal network or your personal brand, and start with the relationship. Start with the people that you know. They might not have the closest proximity to the customer. They might not be the most relevant people that you ask, but you need to ask someone. And I've always felt it's better to start within your network. That's low-hanging fruit. And ask these people if they know someone that you should know. I've always found that to be a great question, whether it's with team members, whether it's with investors, whether it's with customers. You could literally ask your customer, how do I find more people like you? Do you know someone that I should know? That's a much nicer way of saying, can you help me sell this to people? And people are generally receptive to that framing of words. So don't sleep on LinkedIn. If you're not active on LinkedIn, that's fine. I'm a bit of a LinkedIn snob, but I will say that people will look you up. People will Google search. People will try to find you. If they're interested in working with you, everyone should have a default profile on there. But LinkedIn can also be a great way to find advisors. I remember literally getting a LinkedIn premium account when I was building a business in the gift card industry, and I searched for people in the gift card business. I found the president of the Gift Card Association in the US. He agreed to a call where then he agreed to be an advisor, and then he flew me out to a conference where I met the gift card program managers for Home Depot, Walmart, and Best Buy. So again, this startup didn't end up like working or flourishing, but I was like in the perfect position to learn and to iterate and to come up with a product because I leveraged a network. I leveraged a social network. So this could be as simple as like literally to create course record, which is I don't even know if I mentioned the brand name, but to create this performance drink, um, I literally started with a post on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook saying, who knows anyone in their network that has experience with injection molding and plastics? Now, I'm not going to go into detail why I was asking for that, but that's how off I was on my initial concept. But unless you're willing to put that first message out and say, do you know anyone that knows this? Do you have anybody that has this type of knowledge or expertise? You'll never figure out what your product or service or idea could be. And lastly, on this page, start outbound, not inbound. So I'm not saying don't do it, but you might not even need a website or landing page. Um, don't expect to, using the fishing analogy, to put a net in the water and the fish just to come in. That's later. But you really want to start outbound in terms of picking up the phone, putting out those messages, making those calls, sending those text messages, starting with people that you maybe have some relationship with that might have some relevance or proximity to what you're trying to build and the problem you're trying to solve. And start with a hypothesis that you think this type of customer might be good, that you think you want to create this kind of product, that you think this is how you're going to make money. But just be very flexible because that might change as soon as you talk to someone. Does anyone have any questions so far or comments or want to share your particular use case so we can go forward thinking a little bit about it in the back of your mind? Feel free to unmute and say a couple words. Cool. No problem, no pressure. Feel free to, again, cut me off and just jump in anytime. Um, Also adding here, this is where it helps, I think, to build a scratch your own itch kind of product or service or experience. When I created a golf simulator lounge, it was literally because I wanted to golf, and the only real good place to do it in the winter in Winnipeg was literally booked 7 days in advance. There was no way to make a tee time. And I thought this was a situation where the demand for this service outstripped the supply of these services. I created something, I followed my passion, and I scratched my own itch because this was my own problem or my own experience. I wanted this product. I wanted to solve my own problem. I wanted a place to go and hang out with my friends on a Tuesday night. So that can be an advantage because if you look at the example where I created software for paramedics, I'm not a paramedic. So the disadvantage is when I reach out to the market for feedback, I'm so dependent on what the market has to say. I'm so dependent on those first conversations. Whereas for something like this, if you're building a scratch your own itch business, this also lays true to this performance drink, you can at least bounce the idea off yourself. And at least that gives you something. I'm not saying it's validation. I'm just saying it's a starting point because your initial assumptions, which you should thoroughly test, will be that much more accurate without you having to do much. So it's also you're going to be infinitely more passionate if you're solving your own problem too. But it's just one type of startup. I'm very much for the scratch your own itch, although you can definitely build any type of product for any type of user. There's a, there's a right and a wrong way to talk. We're not going to go into crazy detail here, but I just want to share a few tidbits that I've seen entrepreneurs go wrong, including myself. Uh, Number one, try not to lead with the solution in these conversations. In just starting any conversation with a prospective buyer or a prospective advisor or someone with industry expertise, it can be helpful to let them know what you're building, but just be aware that when you lead with, I'm doing this, you don't necessarily give them as much of a chance to really articulate the problem and the process that they have. So just be very mindful. You don't want to corner them. Um, you really want to almost require constructive criticism when you do get to explaining what your idea is. This is a little bit through the emotional intelligence I was sharing, like just making somebody feel comfortable enough, even if they don't know you well, they're still allowed to share what they don't like about your thing. So if I don't get negative feedback, I often make them by saying, what's one thing that could be better? What's one thing you don't like about this? Instead of just being, what's wrong? You could force them to say one particular thing. And that often gets something. Because I often hear, we give samples, we'll give hundreds of cans to a golf course, and they'll say, everyone loves our drink. And I'll push them and say, okay, well, yeah, everyone loves drinks. Like, what feedback did they say that could make it better? Oh, yeah, everybody loves it. It's all, they really push back. And then I finally say, okay, what's one thing you can remember that somebody didn't love? And then they'll say, oh, some people said it's too sweet. Okay, great. Finally, we get to that feedback. Some people think our drink is too sweet, and we should be mindful of that feedback despite the fact we're already beyond first customer. You're always learning and digging for that feedback. And when they say something, um, ask them why. Like if somebody says that they think the product has excellent branding, they think the product is really stands out. Ask them why it stands out. Ask them what about it actually stands out. This might sound like you're like pushing against yourself to get the sale, but it's very effective in terms of learning to almost take a pessimistic approach and being like, you like it. Why do you like it? Because that answer can be infinitely valuable. When you're talking, it's really helpful to understand what the process is, understand details of the process, exactly when things happen, how they happen, in what environment. When we were building software for paramedics, it was very relevant to understand when they didn't have a good internet connection, that information had to be available in a certain format. It was very helpful to understand how much time a paramedic, an emergency responder, had to interact with our software. It was less than we initially anticipated. So you realize then, as you understand the process and the timeline, that somebody has seconds to deal with a software tool, not minutes. So understanding the details of the process is infinitely important. Asking closed questions and open questions. An open question would be like, "What's it like doing this?" Or a closed-ended question might be something like, "What's the worst part of doing that?" To force them to give something specific, whereas let them speak very broadly about something. Both are fitting, but just make sure you're not trying to jam the product down anyone's throat. Um, it's never helpful. Again, there might be some rare circumstance, like if you're at a trade show, maybe you don't want to be, asking every customer, what's your pain point, what's your process. But this is particularly when you're dealing with those first customers. Um, Allow them the chance to land on the solution themselves. See if what you do or want to do actually fits with what the market is looking for. And really, this expression uh, is what I really think everybody should be thinking about when it comes to building a startup. The idea of go and see for yourself, Genshi Gembutsu. COVID has had a bit of an impact on this, but I think COVID is an excuse. The idea is you want to actually see your customer in action as much as humanly possible. Um, if you can't see them in person, you want to strap a GoPro to their head and see what they do. Ask them to send a video. Everyone's equipped with an iPhone now, so to have the excuse that you can't see someone do something just because they're in a different city than you is ridiculous. Um, have a Zoom call, have them send pictures. But the idea of actually seeing something for yourself just provides a way better opportunity to learn and allow you to get close to the customer to figure out what it is that they actually need. So get creative. If you can't meet somebody in person because you're currently working in a 9 to 5 job, but you want to get feedback during your lunch hour with a plant manager, get that plant manager to take a video, get them to send a picture. All of that is better than just asking somebody to call you, because one lesson here is customers are actually horrible at explaining what their problems are and what they do. So very rarely do you get a customer that's very articulate about what it is that they need. You often have to tease it out of them. You often have to see them do it. When I asked paramedics what was so problematic about their job, because they do it every single day, they didn't have that outsider's perspective. They didn't get it. They didn't see their own challenge. So going and seeing something, just realize you might be better equipped to see the customer's problem or an opportunity to make things better. You have to be out there to actually see that. You can't just expect the customer to spoon feed you what the perfect product or solution would be. And really, when we're going about this process, when we start to get in front of potential customers, um, you're going to get a lot of initial signs that people want what you have. So you might have a prototype and you might convince a customer to start using it. You might have a product that is kind of finished that is in a customer's hands. But just be aware of kind of what the difference is between traction and validation. Validation is when people tell you they want your product, they like your idea. It's that early interest or feedback. Whereas traction is proving that people are using or buying your product. So that's the difference. Do they want your product, or do you have proof that they're buying your product? And often it's just the former. Validation is often vanity at the beginning. That's okay. Just understand when you're starting to get feedback about your idea and you're getting closer to actually getting that first sale or multiple sales, just be aware that you should be led by traction and not validation. If a customer is asking for 5 new features and that customer has never paid you any money, or they're not actually a customer yet, that's a little bit different than a customer that's currently paying. It's a repeat customer or an active user, which is basically the same thing. Um, that's a different level of feedback. So know who you should pay attention to. We're looking at stuff like paid customers, active users, distribution agreements. I mean, even if you have a public relations story that goes viral, you might consider that traction. It depends on your particular story, but just don't try to BS yourself in terms of, oh, we had this influencer, or we had, again, in my example, I was on every major news station. That's not traction if we release that information and we don't land a big customer or we don't increase our user base. So the other good way to think about it is product market fit. If you do give your product to a customer and you took it away, would that customer care? Would that customer flip out? If all of a sudden Apple started producing iPhones, imagine how batshit crazy, pardon my pun, or pardon my French, imagine how batshit crazy we would go if all of a sudden we had no iPhones. So we have to really be aware of that and make sure we're getting feedback from the right people as we get closer to actual customers. Again, example here, we had an influencer in the picture on the left with 500,000 followers, Sarah Winter, and We had pictures of her drinking our product at a large trade show. She said how she loved it. We gave thousands of samples to golfers. We had all types of press release. You can find interviews I did, I think, on YouTube. Um, it was a fantastic event, and my team kept saying to me, like, what do you think, Luke? Aren't we crushing this event? Um, and really, I was wanting to see the information on the right. I was wanting to be able to say, which we can now, that we found customers in 7 new states, that we found that we did sales right then and right there to new golf courses, and we sold more product and we got more dollars in the bank account because of the event. Um, so that's the difference between attraction and validation. Traction can just be that nice fluffy story that can help you get the traction, but just be aware of the difference when you're building your startup, when you're finding your first customers, and you're trying to understand if you really have something or not. Really, this is where it's important to not necessarily target everybody at the same time. Um, Otherwise, you'll have a good chance being burnt out. So, really, we want to look for early adopters. Really, we want to look for people that are going to make time for you. Somebody said the other day that customers weren't making time for them to actually get feedback at the early stage. I'd argue those were people that they shouldn't have been talking to anyways. Um, early early adopters and innovators. The book Crossing the Chasm is fantastic for that. I should have a picture, but basically, it says about 1.5% of all customers are innovators, and about 14.5%, I think, about 15% are early adapters um, and or early adopters. And early adopters really are the ones that are willing to take a product that's only 80% finished. They're more forgiving of a product or a service that's not working quite right. They're also able to actually see through your pitch. If your pitch isn't perfect, if you send an email with a bad subject line that's like not written optimally, they'll see through it and they'll see value in what you're doing and they'll talk to you anyways. They will give more and they'll give better feedback. They'll make an excuse for having time with you. Um, they're often thought leaders and influencers, or at least they're connected to other people where they could point you in the direction of somebody that could actually help you too. Often early adopters want to be first. Literally, that's how we got our first customer. It was literally with the pitch and with the understanding the general manager um, of a golf course understood that they would be the first ones in the world to have course record. And as soon as the GM understood that, it was like, can I buy 6 cases of your drinks today? So, I mean, that's something that you can leverage. Not everybody wants that. Some people are laggards and they want to wait till everyone else has already tested it to see, oh, is this drink going to sell? Do our golfers want this drink? Will we be able to get this in front of golfers? Can we convince golfers to pay $1 more for this drink than a Gatorade? Um, all that stuff is not so important to an early adopter who's kind of looking for an excuse to be first. And actually, if your pitch is too polished or the product is too good, they might think something is too perfect and they might not be in. So you want to look and see how you can profile these early adopters. Um, they make time instead of excuses. They share their problems openly with you as something that you can actually go beyond and solve. They have ideas of the best ways to move forward. If you're not sure about how to do something, you might even not be sure on the next feature or even how to charge them. There's a lot of things that are in early stage entrepreneurship where you don't know. But if you're in front of a good early adopter or an innovator at the early side of kind of the chasm of entrepreneurship and technology adoption, which does not just mean technology, by the way, it's adopting new products. They'll help you. That early customer, if they're the right one, they'll help you. They'll be empathetic and they'll want you to succeed. I really remember having a customer I did a $30,000 sale with. I was selling robots to farmers to be simplistic, as you can see in the picture below. I literally remember that customer saying that I was addressing a few concerns. There was a few in our letter of intent that we first signed. There was a few things that I wasn't sure about in terms of the features, in terms of how the customer would interact with the product, and it was a $30,000 sale, so I was a bit nervous about it. But that customer basically said that they're not worried about those details. They trust that it's in our best interest to make it work for them, and they're happy to be one of the first to use it. That's exactly what you want to hear because they knew that they would have an influence over how the product was built. And that's going to be very different than another customer who might just not respond to your message. So try to target those early adopters. They might be sold just on your vision and mission statement. They might be sold on your ability to just deliver something. They'll often expect things will go wrong and that things won't be perfect, and they're just optimistic that you'll be able to figure it out. In terms of how I would communicate with them, again, for finding your first customer, hopefully you can find them largely through a relationship. Maybe, again, remember where we first reached out to people in our network. Maybe they connected you to somebody else. Maybe that person becomes a great first customer. But there is circumstance where you will have to send text messages or emails or cold outreach. It might be warm, it might be you might be able to say that you know so and so, but in that situation, this is just a good frame that I've thought of as I've done my dozen first customer acquisitions in different businesses. Try to think of a subject line that pops. Think of what you have and who it helps, and really say what you need to get an early adopter to open it. That's all that matters, right? You're not writing your subject line or your email for everybody. You write it for that 15%. Um, because if you find somebody that's not in that 15%, you're going to lose out too. Um, because if that first customer is not so excited that they're willing to provide you the time of day, you won't be able to turn that customer's experience into that juicy case study that allows you to then sell customers 2 through 10. So just like it's very important who the first few hires you make for your company, it's also infinitely important who you almost choose to be your first customer or your first users, because if they're the right ones, you can leverage them forever. So target them, write emails for them, message for them. Introduce yourself by first name. Tell people you're an entrepreneur or a founder or both, because yes, early adopters want to work with entrepreneurs. Tell them you're looking to solve problems. Seek reliability without being relatability without being cheesy. So this is like saying that this could be something great like Nancy at Innovate Eastman told me to reach out. It could be that. That's not cheesy at all. Or it could be like, hey, I was just I was in Pinawa 6 months ago at a bachelor party golfing, and you have a great golf course, and would love to see our product there. So try to find some kind of relatability, something of familiarity. I always feel that's a good way to approach it, and that's almost like the excuse why you're contacting them. You're contacting them because their name came up because you were just at their location. Um, I always talk about like uh, customized or personalized templates, where you want to create a template maybe because you want to message a bunch of people, but personalize it. Again, this is about that kind of raw hustle. You're not at the point here where you should be using email automation tools to, hello, insert name, I'm so and so. This is right now, you want to be customized. You want to show that level of personalization, show that you care, you did your homework. And you can do this all pretty succinctly. So don't think that all these bullets means it needs to be a big long message. Use ChatGPT to help you write it more succinctly. Um, I would mention to them that you consider them to be an early adopter or you're looking for the first customer. I often write in emails, I'm looking for the first customer in Rhode Island, um, because there's enough people that would care about having that status. Um, you know, Obviously have a big bang statement of what you do and why it's special. Your vision is often a part of that. Clarify that you're early stage though. So you have your vision statement or you're doing, you say what you're doing and clarify that you're early stage, say what your assumptions. Um, and what I really like to do here is you let people know that, you're not too sure what you're doing. I like to be very, I guess, humble about it, but then also then immediately add in any proof that you have. So tell people, you're just figuring out the best way to get your product out there. You're just figuring out what you should be building in the first place. But tell people that you've surveyed 50 customers like them. Tell people that you have other sales. Tell people that you've spent the last decade in this business trying to figure out how to solve problems. So it might be you're Luke, the entrepreneur, who's not quite sure what you're doing, but then extend some credibility and say you know what you're doing. You're passionate about this. You have some type of social proof or something that you've done to kind of validate this. And and some kind of call to action. I like asking for advice. Even if you want money, it's good to ask for advice. Um, even now with our startup, which I understand it's a bit different because it's not business to business. But I'm talking about golf courses. We have dozens of golf courses now secured, but each time I'm messaging one, I'm almost positioning it. I'm asking for the sale, but I'm almost doing it in a way with the golf courses that I really want to sell with my new drink. I'm almost framing it like a call for advice. Or right now, I'm reaching out to distributors and big box retailers. I'm almost framing it when I find the right contact, like whether or not you can get me into your location, can you give me some feedback on what I'm doing? How do I get this into distributors? How do I get this into big box retail? And if you approach it that way, they might feel, first of all, I think you'll learn a lot so that you can apply it to more customers, but you'll also have a better chance of them just being willing to give you time if you're seeing beyond that particular sale and you legitimately want feedback. So that can be a great way to get that. If it's not been clear through this presentation, I'm literally going through these processes now. So I'm in the trenches with you all in terms of reaching out, structuring emails, getting people's attention, doing the raw hustle. Um, it's it's a lot, but again, you can get a little bit better at it. It doesn't need to be scary. Um, these are just a quick structure. I'm not going to spend time sitting on this slide. I'm happy to send out the whole deck, but really there's a lot of structures in terms of how to build that initial pitch when you are sending an email, when you do get in front of a customer. My company insert name is developing insert offering to help insert target audience, insert the problem you're solving, and with insert the secret sauce. So that might look like, Airbnb is developing a marketplace to help travelers find affordable, unique lodging by, solving the problem of expensive or unavailable hotels um, through a booking system. So finding a good structure like this can be helpful, as is the second one that I have here of just figuring out how to frame stuff. But again, and there's a lot that you could find online, but just if you're not sure how to structure something, look at other startups, look at something like this, and also ask your customers. Again, if you're not sure how to position something, I remember telling customers, for example, it's good to be able to say that you're Uber for X or you're Airbnb for Y, or you are Strava for golfers. I know a company I'm partnering with is they're basically building Strava for golfers. Now, if you don't know what Strava is, this is a tough pitch to interpret, but depending on your target market, maybe everybody in your target market knows what that particular business or service is. So often your customers, though, can help you figure out the best quick pitch. Your, you can show a prospective customer, an advisor, or your first customer your pitch and say, I don't know how to say this. How would you say it? If you ask stuff like that enough times, you'll end up with something really, really nice and juicy. So I would severely encourage that. Um, Notice most of this time we're not talking about product, we're talking about sales, we're talking about approaching first customers, approaching early adopters. Um, Really, a lot of the time we're going to be wanting to build something or need to build something. We're going to need to, and sometimes that something is bigger. Like I couldn't I couldn't produce actually a finished drink less than 10,000 cans if I wanted to do this. So sometimes that threshold can be higher, but again, often it can be a picture or a prototype. It doesn't have to be a finished thing just to get feedback. So this book by Eric Ries, The Lean Startup, I've listened to it multiple times, three or more. And basically, it talks about building a minimum viable product, or I like to say a minimum desirable product, to not over engineer the product, because I truly believe that most startups spend too much time on the product and not enough time actually on customers or traction goals. So don't do that. Build based on what real customers you have access to say they need and they're willing to pay for. Okay. And really, success you should see here, it's really learning how to solve the customer's problem. Your product, your service, your experience is honestly just a tool to allow you to get to the next step. It doesn't matter what you start with in terms of a product. We can't get so emotionally attached to our app or our drink or our brick and mortar lounge. It's really you got to put something in there to figure out something even bigger. So it's about learning. It's about the process here in this book. It really talks about build, measure, learn. Again, what you have to build might change, but just have it in your mind. You're going to build something, the smallest thing you can, and through validated learning, you're going to be able to measure how customers like it and how they're using it and how well it solves their problems, and then you're going to learn. In terms of when you're actually going into some of these conversations, really there's four hats and you might have to wear all four of these hats. But really, there's actually driving the conversation from a sales perspective. There's actually, having a product person or a product mentality, thinking, okay, this means we need this feature. Okay, this is how we would build the next version of our thing, or we would build a space or provide an experience, a service. Then there's the design piece, which I think design software is so abundant, and I would all be using Canva to design rudimentary prototypes almost no matter what you're doing on this call. We can all be designers and show the customer and allow the customer to give feedback or even play with something. And then there's the actual engineering side, the actual building out of features. This can be four different people or it can be the same person. So just be aware when you're going into conversations, there's selling, there's actually the positioning of the product, there's the designing, and then there might be the actual engineering or building. I don't recommend when you find a customer that's willing to do something, I don't recommend to do it for free. I'd recommend to make sure that customer has skin in the game. I touched on this before, but if your early adopter is not the right early adopter, um, and especially then you lose out on a lot of potential value because if you can wrap up the perfect customer champion experience and put a bow on top, that's something you can take to investors, to more customers. If you find the right first customer, they'll go with you to your investor meeting. They'll recommend additional customers. So you really want to make sure that you're attracting a customer that is dedicated, that is willing to provide you that extra level of information, that will let you monitor their experience, that will let you survey them daily, that will give you a detailed testimonial, which you shouldn't wait to get that testimonial too far later, but right after it happens, when the emotions are hot, actually understand what happened with that first customer. Um, is that customer proud of their experience? Do they want it or would they have it again? So having some skin in the game, it's not saying it has to be paid, but there should be a commitment level that's in there. It shouldn't just be, oh, you're willing to take this thing and try it. It should be some level of commitment. It could be a discount. It could be a non-monetary thing, like agreeing to their certain amount of time. But as much as possible, I would push early adopters to pay. For this reason, you want to make sure they're serious about solving their problem. Again, it depends a little bit on the startup, but even for a software application, whatever, are they going to provide regular feedback? Are they willing to really use it, or are they just going to try it for an hour, one time? In terms of actually figuring out what you're going to say from some of these customers, um, now you have that first customer. In terms of actually selling and scripting, don't worry if you don't have the pitch perfect here. Because as you go from one customer to 10 customers and 100 customers, you're going to figure out first how to sell something in 45 minutes before you can get down to 4 to 5 seconds. Before you have that perfect advertisement that you put up on meta ads across Facebook and Instagram that's highly converting, um, you're going to have to spend some time figuring out how to convert somebody if you had 45 minutes of their time. That might be the case. And then in that 45 minutes, you'll eventually figure out what's that one key sentence or that one key thought that then converts other customers. So you want to find people that are willing to give you that little bit extra time. It won't be every type of customer, but hopefully that first customer is in this boat. Hopefully, you can record these conversations and put them into particular applications like Otter, for example, because it is 2025, and a lot of the time a customer will let you record them. I just found out there was a record button on iPhone calls I didn't know about, so I'm still learning. Um, but really, you want to understand, again, don't think everything's going to be perfect. You might not know the best way of positioning your thing, but start with the people that are willing to give you more time and then learn how to tighten it up. And eventually you'll be able to give them one sentence and you'll be able to close them or convince them to try what it is that you're doing. I believe this is the last slide. There might be two left. So we'll open up to Q&A momentarily. But beyond that first customer, customers 2 through 10, and then customers 10 through 100, you know, we're largely still relationship selling. We're largely still looking for feedback here. It's not like you find the first customer and everything is done and your business and your life is just grand. You're still grinding and you're still learning, but there's a few kind of patterns that I see here as you're starting to refine the process. Maybe you're going from putting everything in an Excel document to all of a sudden you're using QuickBooks for invoicing instead of like literally I started doing invoicing on Canva just to describe a process thing. Now I have too many customers. I don't want to invoice on Canva anymore. We're going to start invoicing on QuickBooks. I used to have an Apple Note where I wrote down the names of all of our customers. Now we have a CRM that's doing that. So again, don't over engineer, don't over process, don't overcomplicate things, but understand you'll be continuously refining your business plan and your process as you go from one customer to 5 to 10 to 20 and beyond. Understand that even though you may or may not be the salesperson, you might have to be the salesperson at the beginning. And it's often beneficial because you bring in somebody, you're going to need to pay them, you're going to need to train them to understand every single thing that you know and that you've experienced from idea stage to where you are now. And I've just heard from others that the first 250,000 to 500,000 is a good range for you to just be focused on bringing in yourself as much as possible. Delay investors as much as possible. That's also why you don't want to over engineer and pay for things you don't need. Investors may or may not be something you need. If you can bootstrap forever, that's fantastic, meaning you basically don't rely on any outside funding. Maybe you grow more slowly, but you keep control, and that's something every founder I think should see as valuable. But at least delay investors until you have some of these lighthouse customers where you can wrap up their story with a tight little bow on top and show the investors, you're figuring out how to find more customers like them. Because the more you feel like you're putting gas on the fire and more customers flock, the gas on the fire idea, you could show there is a fire, you rub two sticks, you know how to produce the flame, the investor brings the gasoline. So delay that if you can. Get testimonials right away as soon as you do have that customer experience. I've sometimes waited a few months just because you're so busy, but then the customer will never remember it the same way. They won't be willing to give you the same time. So when you do something great for a customer and maybe they just send you a text message and they're like, "Hey, Nancy, what you did is just so phenomenal." Ask them to if you can use that in writing. Ask them if you can take a screenshot of that thing. Ask them if you can use that picture. Ask for permission. Um, and then you can start going after dream customers right away. Like you don't have to wait. If you've landed your first few customers and you're ramping up and you know the perfect places or people you'd like to sell to, start targeting them and then go through that email script that we saw before. Go visit their location and see them in person. The more intimate, the better. So if you can visit every customer in person through some raw hustle, that's going to help. Um, I would delay stuff like data analytics, like robust data analytics, as much as possible. For your first few customers and users, just talk to people. You don't want to over engineer things, you don't want to overcomplicate things, and really understand what moves the needle for your particular startup. It's going to be different for going from 0 to 1 customer, then 10 to 20 customers, then 20 to 100 customers. But just understand what's that important thing that's going to get you to that next level, that next amount of sales, that next amount of customers. And really, the goal of doing all of this as a last thing here is you want to be able to do this um, and not burn out from it. So that's why it's also important to find that first customer, to not over engineer your product. Because I've been in that spot where I've burnt out because I spent too long finding the first few customers, and that can be very disheartening. So as a good way to ensure that your time is being well spent building the business, um, and also just to keep yourself motivated and improving and have something that is valuable you can share with future customers, you got to get the first one. You got to get the first few customers using something as fast as you can with the least amount of time, money, resources, and risk so that you can keep moving through this. And once you find those first few customers, I assure you it won't guarantee success, but it'll be a lot easier to do. And the only way you'll succeed is by actually finding them. So my email's here. Nancy is happy to connect us, and I will stop sharing the presentation. I'll turn off record, and I'm happy to sit and hang out and address questions. And we can always just have a one-on-one session, because I didn't get the chance to learn about a lot of your individual startups. Would love to have those conversations no matter what stage you're at, no matter whether this is purely an idea or whether you have a minimum viable product and a couple users or a customer. So thanks, everybody.